We start the second Atari 8-bit list with a game I already recorded a Let's Play video of sometime during last year, Spelunker. It's one of the rare games that I actually played on a real Atari back in the day, and as such, one of only 2 leftovers from the previous list. And if you saw my Let's Play video of this game, you can tell that it's one of those games that kind of requires a lot of revisiting if you're wanting to become or remain being good at it. Spelunker was one of the first platforming games to have a relative massive map, and in its original form, a rarity in being one that was pretty much hand-drawn from start to finish. Our protagonist can only jump a certain length and cannot move in mid-air, so it's a very early platformer in that sense. But the environment is built around that consideration, so that shouldn't be much of a problem. There are only a couple of types of enemies to mention, the reappearing ghost and the rather vast number of bats, but the further down you proceed into the mines, the more often the ghost will reappear. There are a number of items you can pick up, such as dynamite, flares, energy items, extra lives, keys and whatnot, but as I learned the hard way during the making of that Let's Play video, you have to strategize when to pick up items, as they all act as checkpoints to where you will respawn after dying. This is definitely a game that has left an impression on modern independent game developers and continues to hook new gamers in for good reasons. If you're not familiar with Spelunker yet and want to get into it, I have to be clear. Stay clear of the NES version and only play either the original, which is this one, or some direct port of it. If you want some clarification on that, you can find a comparison of Spelunker from my blog, and a link for the comparison is below in the video description. Here's an Atari-exclusive arcade action game from English Software, Captain Sticky's Gold, by Stephen Riding. At first, it looks like a Frogger variant, since your job is to get across the field of moving things, which in this case are fishes and other nautical creatures, to grab a gold item that moves around along the pipeline with 3 pickup points. But here you can shoot the fishes and other such things, which is a nice deviation from the form. Speaking of which, the fishes and such also change their direction every 10 seconds or so. You also have an oxygen meter to keep an eye out on, which can be replenished by surfacing on aboard the ship, which is a nice additional element. You're also inconvenienced by bombs getting dropped from helicopters and other singular annoyances for each level, which can, for example, eat up some of your oxygen or kill you instantly. Captain Sticky's Gold is an enjoyable, if a bit steeply toughening game, and well worth having in your Atari collection. Too bad it didn't get the originally planned sequels, but a game by Tim Ferriss called Cosmic Tunnels claims to be the 4th game in the Captain Sticky saga. Whatever the truth is, that's another story which we might get into in a later episode. Montezuma's Revenge has been mentioned before in my Nostalgia Trip games, actually as the very first game in the Commodore 64 series. But I will have to mention it again now, because when I finally got to experience more Atari 8-bit games through emulation, I found out about the original prototype, which differs from the commercially released version quite a bit. Of course, being a prototype is obviously unfinished, so it's impossible to beat. But the surprise is, whereas the commercial release makes you go through increasingly large sections of the pyramid as clearly defined levels, the prototype only has one large map, which ends in a special room where you have a confrontation with King Montezuma himself. Unfortunately, he cannot be defeated. Perhaps more interestingly, the Proto-Montezuma feels more like a puzzle or strategy game in which you really need to figure out the best way to use and obtain keys, and use the other items when absolutely necessary. Because Parker Brothers figured that a 16K cartridge release would have broader marketing potential and limit piracy, they dropped the 48K prototype and left Robert Yeager, the programmer, to make it more compact. Happily, the prototype still exists, but I have to admit I would rather play a fully working version of this than the squeezed release that it had. Either way, Montezuma's Revenge is as great on the Atari, if not better, than on the C64. One of the best shooting games to ever grace the 8-bit Atari computers is Archer McLean's Dropzone. It's basically Defender on steroids, but there's an added objective of picking up little blue things close to the ground level, which the game refers to as men, and bring them to home base before they get blown to smithereens by all sorts of alien enemies. As such, it's nothing particularly interesting, but the speed of the game is mind-blowing, particularly for its age, and the gameplay is extremely fine-tuned. I actually don't have this game as an original on the Atari, but I do have an original tape on the Commodore 64, which actually says UK Gold instead of US Gold, making this the only game to have that logo on the cover. Mind you, the Atari version has the regular US Gold logo on it. Anyway, I made a comparison of Dropzone about 5 years ago, which basically confirms the popular opinion that the game is best played on an Atari. But, as I said back then, Dropzone is highly recommendable to any shooter fan, but gamers with low reaction times will find it difficult to enjoy. But it's definitely worth checking out, and it's a great nostalgia trip game for a quick blast if you're into this sort of thing. The last one for today is famous for having tape loading music, which was definitely an oddity on the Atari computers. The game in question, The Lone Raider, had a dual audio tape in which the other channel, assumedly the right one, played the data while the other one, probably left, played music. So unlike tape loaders on the Commodore 64, for instance, the music was actually recorded onto the tape instead of programmed in as a part of the loader sequence itself. But I'm still lacking a working Atari cassette drive, hence the emulated loading experience approximation. And obviously I'm loading this game from an SD card reader. As a game, The Lone Raider isn't anything particularly special, although it has a structure and a storyline that makes it a bit more interesting than your other run-of-the-mill Pac-Man variants and other space-themed action games. You start off by teleporting yourself onto the alien planet, where you first fend off enemies to gain access to the Pac-Man-ish segment, which you must get through in order to get into the heart of the planet, destroy the core, and return to the surface. Repeat indefinitely. I'm sure it practically reeks of 1983, but as it is, it's one of the more fun and interesting Atari exclusives, and it's a regular part of my Atari nostalgia trips, even without the tape.